And ladies and gentlemen, my name is Terry Godwalt, and it is a pleasure to be here. How about I turn my video on? Not that that makes it any more pleasant for anyone here, but I'm actually joining you from the provincial, it's called the Alberta Teachers Association. And so I had a brilliant session this morning on project-based learning. And I'm looking forward to this session we have now on Twitter. And so it is with great honor that I introduce to you Rhonda Jensen. Jensen, she is joining us from her daytime job is she's a program manager with Alberta Education, and specifically doing some brilliant work around new technologies and a new curriculum that's making its way to the forefront called CTF. On top of her work that she's doing in that regard, she is really a global leader in terms of her work with professional learning networks and communities. Her work on new and emerging technologies and helping teachers to meaningfully integrate them into the curriculum. She has many, many years in the classroom, joining Alberta Education most recently from some time just a little bit further south with the school board that you were with for, you have to let me know how many years you were with that, but really quite a while. And so without any further ado, I'd like to turn the microphone over to Rhonda, who will be sharing with us today about Twitter. Over to you, Rhonda.
Hi, everybody. I came here from Chinook's Edge, and then I moved up to Edmonton. And before I came up here to work on CTF, well, you know what teachers are like. I taught some of everything, but I'm mostly a media and computer teacher. And before I start, I just want to get a sense of, one, how many people I'm speaking to. So if you can let me know how many people are at your site, and also your experience with Twitter. Do people have experience with Twitter? Are you brand new? So I'm going to give you a sec to either answer with audio or type something in the text. Oh, it looks like Maureen and Tim are by themselves. Oh, and Craig, oh, it's a quiet one today. Okay. And then what about experience with Twitter? Are you tweeps and you've been using Twitter for a while? Oh, Julie's used Twitter before. Great. I know Maureen does. And Craig's just starting. Super. Yeah, if you use Twitter, why not share your handle? What about you, Susan? Have you used Twitter before? Okay, I'm getting the sense that, there's Julie's handle. I'm getting the sense that people have used Twitter maybe a little bit, but not very deeply. As I'm going along, if you have questions, please ask either in the chat window or with audio, and I will try and remember to stop and pause and ask for questions. Terry has already shared with you the link to this presentation. There's quite a few hyperlinks we won't have time to get to today, and I'm fairly certain we probably won't even get through all the slides, but I wanted to give you as much info as I could. So I'm just going to start. Twitter, hopefully you all know, it's what they call a crowdsourced microblog. And it's also a really fast-growing social platform on the planet. If you want, later on you can click on that link. There's a whole article with a really excellent infographic about how people do use Twitter. It's an excellent tool for connecting with educators around the globe. And some have suggested it's actually a new literacy practice, and I've included a hyperlink to that. Welcome, Technology High. I admit when I first heard about Twitter, I thought it was pretty silly. It seemed like a place where people were talking about their dogs, which is what the internet seemed like when it first started. But then when I started listening to educators talk about how they use Twitter, I thought that it had value. Although I'll admit that I started and stopped using Twitter several times before I actually started using it. So tweet is a message, or they call it a post, and there's an example of a tweet at the bottom of this slide. Your tweets can include images and video, but you're limited to a total of 140 characters, which is why tweets often contain text speak. So people shorten things down, get rid of as many vowels as they can so they can use as much words as they can. And I'll point out here, so this tweet was from John Robinson. In the top right-hand corner, you can see that there's a green arrow that indicates that I've retweeted it, and it even tells you that I've retweeted it. And it was a popular tweet. When I grabbed this yesterday, it had been retweeted 5 times and favorited by 2 people. And that's why the little pictures are there. So those are people that have liked the tweet or wanted to share the message with their followers. There's a lot of different ways to use Twitter. There's a lot of different levels of engagement. The first couple of times I had educators introduce me to Twitter, it was a bit misleading. The first guy to introduce me to Twitter was Real Richardson, who's got millions of followers. And he was in a session, and he said, yeah, this is how people use Twitter, you know, and he showed some examples about how somebody had lost their luggage. And by tweeting and having people in their network retweet, the luggage was found almost immediately. Another example I saw was Alec Kouros, who's a Canadian educator, probably one of the best known Canadian educators, I would say, in the connected education community, who's got many thousands of Twitter followers. And I've seen him on many occasions in a session. He'll tweet out a message and say, well, what did you eat for breakfast? And immediately people would start responding. When I first started using Twitter, it just seemed like a lot of noise. And if I tweeted out a message like that, people didn't answer me. So it seemed like I was standing in a room full of people making noise, and I was maybe trying to contribute, but nobody was answering back. Once I started understanding how you can harness the power of Educator, how harness the power of Twitter, and how Twitter uses, educators use Twitter, I saw the value and I came back to it. But I have to admit, I stopped at least twice before I started using it. There are ways that you can use Twitter without even having a Twitter account, although it sounds like most of you do. Has anybody here ever used TweetChat before? I don't know if you know how to smile or agree with me, or maybe mention in the chat window if anyone's used TweetChat before. Okay, looks like Maureen has used it, but maybe nobody else. TweetChat, and the address, the URL is tweetchat.com, and it lets you look at Twitter without having an account. You can sign in, and there's actually a little screencast at the bottom, and you notice in the top right-hand corner it says sign in. And I will warn you, by the way, TweetChat has changed its look, and this is an old screencast, so it looks a little bit different. But you can use TweetChat to search for a specific hashtag, for example, EdChat, or you can search for a specific user like Terry at the Center for Global Education, or you can search for trends. For example, if your class is talking about, well, Edmonton just had a civic election, so you could have used TweetChat to have a look at the conversations that are going on about a specific subject. I'm going to mention that TweetChat is out there, and then later at the end of this session, I'm going to mention that I'm hosting a Twitter chat tonight, and if you wanted to participate, TweetChat might be a good tool. But I've probably talked about some terms you might not be familiar with, so I'll just mention what a hashtag is. And a hashtag is that pound sign. And hashtags are used to sort content on Twitter and in different locations. And when Twitter first came out, it did not have hashtags. They actually were created by the Twitter community, but they're a great way to sort content. So for example, right now I'm involved in a MOOC, a massive open online course called the Open Online Experience. And the the hashtag that we're using is OOE13. You notice I listed it right there. Hashtags always start with that hashtag. So anytime any of us post any content that we wanted to be added to the Twitter conversation about OOE, we just add that hashtag to it. And now I can either in my Twitter stream or using a tool like TweetChat, I can search for all the tweets that mention OOE13. And there's different hashtags. For example, here in Alberta, we have a hashtag ABEd for content that just has to do with Alberta education. Sometimes people create their own hashtags to add emphasis, like I'm so excited or things like that. And there are lots of different educational hashtags. Every time I look at one of these lists, more have been created. You can create a hashtag on your own. The last school I was at, we just created our own hashtag so that any time we wanted to converse about what was going on in the school, we could add that hashtag. I'm going to pause for a minute here in case people have any questions. Now, it sounds like most of you already have a Twitter account. I'll just mention that you can just go to twitter.com and go ahead and sign up if you don't have an account. The only thing that might stop you is if somebody already has the username you want, then you'll have to pick another one. Your username does not, it shows up with your tweets, but it doesn't count for your 140 characters. But if somebody wanted to retweet your message or send you a message on Twitter, it would include your username, and that would count as some of their only 140 characters. So it's a good idea to keep your username as short as you can. Once you've set up a user account, you can, in the top right-hand corner, there's that blue New Tweet button. It looks like a box with a quill pen. And you click on that, and then it lets you compose your own tweet. And notice I put an example here. I retweeted someone named Shannon, who shared a blog post that Kathy Cassidy wrote. So when I retweeted, I added the characters RT, plus I needed to include Shannon's username. So that's quite a lot of characters. That's why we want to mention that you want to keep your username short, and it's polite to keep your tweets to less than 130 characters so that if someone wants to retweet them, there's room. Otherwise, they have to change them. And I often want to, when I'm retweeting something, add hashtags so it can be found. You'll notice at the end of this tweet in green, this tweet was shared with the hashtag CanadianEdChat, which is a hashtag for all Canadian educators, with that group I mentioned, OOE13, and with all educators in Alberta with Alberta Ed. This is a great example that was shared by Dean Sharesky. He's an educator out of Saskatchewan. He actually is on secondment right now and is working for Discovery Education Canada. But this is a really good example about the different parts of a tweet. So it explains how the username, BC Seminars, appears in the top right-hand corner and explains different parts of a tweet. I'm going to pause and let you read this, and that'll also give you an opportunity to ask any questions either in the chat or in via audio. And I actually missed this tweet the first time it was sent around by Dean, but then somebody shared it, they retweeted it, and I thought it was so useful. I actually have it archived, and we use it quite a bit. When you first create a Twitter account, by default, your profile photo is a cute little egg because you've just hatched, and there's no information in your profile. So I recommend that you change your profile, and that's using the Edit Profile button, which is in the top right-hand corner just beside the Compose New Tweet. Looks a bit like a gear. And you can add your location, you can add a link to your website, and a short biography. It's quite short. I think it's 160 characters. A lot of people also create a digital splash page and include a link to that, and I've included the hyperlink in here to my About Me splash page. It just allows you to give one-stop shopping for anybody to find you on the web. So my About Me page includes links to my Twitter account, links to my blogs, and things like that. It's not necessary, it's just something that's useful. I'll mention one other thing about your Twitter profile, especially for educators. The way educators often use Twitter, it's to have conversations and develop community. So some people do use icons or animated characters for their personal profile photo, but it is recommended that you use a real photograph because then people can start to see who you are even if they don't know you in person. Once you're in Twitter, you can start to follow people, and you can follow them by clicking on the little follow button when you're looking at their profile page. And why would you want to follow anyone anyway? If you follow them, then all of the tweets that they post show up in your Twitter feed. So if you go to your Twitter feed, you can see what all the people you follow are talking about. So I recommend that you find some educators that you find really engaging, and you follow their content. And then you'll start to see what they're talking about. What people recommend in terms of finding people to follow is when you find someone that you think is interesting and their content is interesting, see who they follow. And maybe you want to follow some of the people that they follow. Some people have different philosophies about who and how to follow people and the number of people to follow. I know Will Richardson has a philosophy that he doesn't follow. I don't think it's even more than 100 people because he's all about making relationships and having discussions. Other people that I really respect, like Alec Kouros, follow a lot of people because it's all about making relationships. I used to have a policy where I only tried to follow a few people, and that was okay, and I found there was some interesting content in my Twitter feed. But within the last year, I've actually been much more open about the number of people I follow. If you're an educator and what I think you have to say looks interesting, I'll follow you. So now I'm following almost 2,000 people. But I find my Twitter feed is much more interesting. There's much more content in there. You can send direct messages in Twitter. By default, anything you send in Twitter shows up in your Twitter feed. And if I copied somebody else, like for example, if I copied Maureen by using her Twitter hashtag in the message, it'll show up in her Twitter stream as well. You can send what they call direct messages to someone as long as they follow you. And that's actually a private message, and it shows up in your direct messages inbox. And you'll notice I put a little icon here that's got an envelope with a little 1 beside it. That's where your direct messages show up, and that was an indicator that I had a direct message from someone, and then you just go click on it, and you can see it. So Twitter does allow you to have private conversations that don't show up in your Twitter feed. However, the person that you want a direct message to has to be following you. Twitter is about having conversations, not just you broadcasting information. So there's a couple things you can do. When you see a tweet that's interesting, you can reply by clicking on the reply button. By default, Twitter is going to include the usernames of anybody that's mentioned in the tweet and the person that sent the tweet. And then you can just type the reply and share it with them. Or you might decide just you want to reply to the person who sent it and not anyone that was copied in, and you can just delete the usernames. You can retweet a message. That's sort of Twitter's user's way of sharing a message that you think is useful. I also often retweet messages to different hashtags. So I'll find somebody shared something that's interesting maybe with their school community, and I might retweet it adding the Alberta Ed hashtag or various different groups that I belong to. Retweeting normally is indicated by having the RT at the beginning of a message. If you had to change the message, either because you wanted to add some content or because it was too long and you had to shorten it, normally you change that to MT. So MT usually indicates that the tweet's been modified. Sometimes retweets are just indicated by quotes so that you can see that it was a quoted message. And then one other thing you can do is add a favorite to a tweet. Not only does that indicate to the Twitter world that, oh, I like this message, it also saves it to your list of favorites. So I didn't used to use favorites very much, but then I found, oh, that tweet that I saw last week about assessment in project-based learning was really interesting. I'd like to find it again. So I started using favorites to indicate tweets I might want to come back to. Maureen, I see you were talking about if you could listen a second time, and Terry is recording this session, so you should be able to. I think he just typed that in. I'm going to gloss over quite quickly in this because this is all hyperlinks. Again, this slideshow has been shared with you. Kathy Cassidy is a Canadian educator from Saskatchewan who uses Twitter in her grade 1 class. She's quite well known around the world for connecting her students with the world, and she just authored a book called Connected from the Start, which is excellent. And this is a post about, in fact, this is a link to her blog about the many ways she uses Twitter in her classroom. A couple of slides ago, I actually had a slide where I was retweeting. Kathy had this excellent post about 3 days ago where somebody commented in one of her blogs about how she had a student face and she should never show student faces. But Kathy has an excellent policy that she's worked out over years about how she protects student privacy in the classroom, so the tweet was excellent. The next one down, Miss Yolis, she's an Australian grade 3 teacher, and her students really are actually much better known for blogging. Her resources about blogging and commenting on blogs are really well known, but the tweet that I've included here, the link to the blog post I've included here, is very excellent about how she uses Twitter in the classroom. I don't know if you're able to, or if anybody knows languages. She's an educator. She used to be in the United States, but she's just moved to Brazil, actually. And she's quite well known for her thoughts about, she doesn't even call it 21st century learning anymore. She calls it modern learning. And this post, Assessment in the Modern Classroom, has some great ideas on how her students have used Twitter in the classroom and how you can assess it. And it's actually part of a 3-part piece where she also eventually talks about using Skype and using blogging and how you can assess that. This next one, 35 interesting ways to use Twitter in the classroom, were all crowdsourced, and there's some great ideas. And then there's many different versions of Bloom's taxonomy using different Web 2.0 tools. This one specifically focuses on Twitter. And the last one was just shared with me 2 days ago. It's an excellent post about how a teacher during the day as she's teaching uses Twitter to share out stuff her students are doing and how she uses it for assessment of learning. When you start using Twitter on a more regular basis, you might become overwhelmed. I know I certainly did. As soon as I started following a few people, and there was all this content in my Twitter stream, and first of all, I felt like I was going to miss something. If I wasn't looking at Twitter all the time, I thought there was going to be that perfect tweet that I was never going to see again. And I needed to develop some strategies on managing the volume that was coming in. So the first thing I want to tell you is almost all really excellent stuff on Twitter is going to be shared again. So don't panic if you're not there. You're going to miss something. But if you're feeling a little overwhelmed by your accessing Twitter or the amount of volume, a really great piece of advice somebody shared with me was that they schedule time to use Twitter. So they picked it based on EdChat, which I think was Tuesday mornings. So they scheduled an hour when they knew they were going to check in on Twitter. I tend to check in first thing in the morning what's going on at work, or when I get to work, check out what's going on in the feeds, and I pop in and out throughout the day, but I try not to do it too often because I can get a little distracted. I'm going to mention, and there's hyperlinks here, there's a couple tools you can use like TweetDeck or Hootsuite. And they're quite good. What they do is manage how your Twitter feed is presented to you. So you can set up different columns that display different things. I have mine set up so I have a column just for the Alberta Ed hashtag, so anything that's been shared using that hashtag shows up in that column. And I'm usually doing a couple of MOOCs, so I have the hashtags for those MOOCs that show up. You also can have mentions and interactions. So I'll mention those tools are there. Like I've said, that you'll have this presentation so you can click on the hyperlink and check them out. Both of those, you didn't used to have an account and you could just log in with your Twitter account. Now you need to sign up for a free account. I see we're getting quite close to the end. I'm going to mention that there's some information in here about curating content, how people aggregate the content that they share. There's some information in here about live tweeting an event. That's sort of a new trend that I try and do where I'm at professional development, where I share out some of the interesting things the speakers say while they're talking. But it depends on the professional development and your level of engagement. But there's some stuff here that you can share. I know this weekend I was at EdCamp here in Edmonton, and it was so engaging and the discussions were so good I was barely on Twitter all weekend. I'm just going to point out that there are some hyperlinks right here to some other information that you might find useful, but I see we're coming very close to the end here. So I'm going to point out that tonight I'm actually going to be hosting a Twitter chat. And what a Twitter chat is, it's basically a conversation that takes place at scheduled time using a specific hashtag. So tonight, all of the participants in that open online experience have agreed that they're going to go online at 7 o'clock Mountain Standard Time, and we're going to be talking about digital citizenship, which is the topic we're looking at this month. So you're more than welcome to join us. You could just go on Twitter tonight at 7 o'clock Mountain Standard Time and look for, we're going to be using two hashtags because we're actually joining two groups. We're also joining with the Post-Ed blog reading group. And so we're going to be using the hashtag OOE13 and ETM chat. So if you either look for that in your Twitter account or in Hootsuite or TweetDeck, you'll be able to follow along. If you like, you can participate. We'd love to have you with us. I feel like I've been talking a mile a minute. I see there's some stuff on the chat, but I haven't been able to participate. So I'm going to pause and see if people have any questions, and have a look in the chat.